Have you ever been so deeply wounded by someone that the only thing louder than your pain was your silence? In a world that glorifies revenge and celebrates retaliation, what if the most powerful comeback is simply choosing not to respond at all? Today, through the timeless wisdom of Billy Graham, we're stepping into a message that doesn't just challenge your instincts, it will reshape your definition of strength, revenge, and healing. We live in a time where power is too often confused with noise, where being bold is equated with being loud, where strength is measured not by patience or peace, but by the sharpness of your clapback, the ferocity of your response, and the speed with which you defend yourself in front of others. Yet the message I bring to you today, a message rooted in grace, truth, and profound spiritual depth, declares something radically different. That silence, when chosen with wisdom and restraint, can be the loudest and most victorious response of all. This silence I speak of isn't born out of fear or weakness, nor does it come from avoidance or passivity. And it certainly doesn't mean letting people get away with their wrongs. Instead, it is the kind of silence that arises from a place of inner strength. The kind that speaks volumes in the absence of words, that reverberates in the hearts of those who hurt you, that whispers with unshakable clarity, "You no longer have power over me," and declares, without anger or retaliation, "I have outgrown the need to fight for validation in your battlefield." There's an unmatched dignity in staying quiet when every part of you wants to shout. A supernatural strength in choosing calm over chaos, peace over pride. Especially when pain is pounding at your door and begging for a reaction. And make no mistake, some people hurt you not out of ignorance, but with intent, poking at your insecurities, provoking your anger, hoping to pull you into a storm where their bitterness can feed off your energy, where your reaction gives them the satisfaction they secretly crave. Yet when you stop reacting, when you no longer participate in the performance of drama, when you stop explaining, defending, and justifying yourself to people who never truly listened in the first place, you instantly rob them of the very power they thought they had over you. You see, when you respond with silence, not out of weakness but out of spiritual maturity, you take back your authority, you preserve your peace, and you keep your future untouched by the mess they tried to drag you into. Because silence, in its most sacred form, is not the absence of voice but the presence of discipline. It's a declaration that you've entrusted the battle, not to your emotions but to God, that you've recognized the wisdom in stepping back rather than lashing out, and that you've chosen the higher ground, the holy ground, where healing begins and chaos cannot dwell. In that sacred quiet, you no longer waste sleepless nights trying to prove your worth to people who discounted it. No longer replay hurtful words just to rehearse pain that God already intends to heal. Because the enemy doesn't just want to wound you, he wants to bait you into a war of pride, drop you in arguments that drain your strength, to keep you locked in a cycle of reaction so you never rise above the offense. But the truth is, not every battle is worthy of your fire, not every insult deserves your breath, and not every betrayal demands a response. For there is a profound difference between reaction and response. One is flesh-driven, fueled by emotion, immediate and impulsive, while the other is spirit-led, soaked in wisdom, surrendered to purpose. And sometimes, yes, sometimes the most powerful response is the one that never leaves your lips, not because you are afraid to speak, but because you are no longer willing to stoop to the level of immaturity, no longer interested in engaging with those who thrive on chaos, and no longer needing to explain yourself to people who were never truly for you in the first place. There will always be eyes watching, waiting for you to stumble, for you to fall apart, for you to act out of character so they can say, "See, I told you they weren't strong." But the most confusing and powerful thing you can do in that moment is remain calm, stay silent, stay focused. And let your peace preach a sermon your words never could, because grace doesn't argue. Healing doesn't perform, and maturity doesn't beg to be understood. You don't owe them a reaction. You don't owe them your voice. And you surely don't owe them access to a version of you that no longer exists. God has been working on you quietly, patiently, in the background, far from the noise and the spotlight, and when He chooses to bring that transformation into the light, when the time is right, your fruit will speak for itself. Your peace will become your defense. And your silence will be the most undeniable testimony that you've not only survived, but grown. So the next time you're tempted to fire back, to get the last word, to prove that they didn't win, pause for a moment, take a breath, and remember this: silence is not surrender, it's sovereignty over your emotions, strength dressed in stillness, and wisdom wrapped in humility. And as we now move to the next part of this message, I want you to reflect on this. What if letting go isn't weakness, but the beginning of the greatest spiritual revenge, one that doesn't shout or strike, but heals, grows, and thrives in peace? You see, the most powerful victories often begin in the quiet places, those internal moments when you choose peace over provocation, when you resist the urge to speak just to be heard, when you feel the fire of offense rising up but decide to let it burn out rather than spread. And what many fail to understand is that this kind of restraint isn't weakness, it's wisdom, it's maturity, it's a sacred pause that allows the Spirit to lead rather than the flesh to react. There will always be people who wound you not once, but repeatedly, not because they misunderstand you, but because they find some strange comfort in watching you unravel. Because your reaction validates their pain, your anger feeds their need for control, and your attention, even if negative, gives them a kind of twisted power that helps them justify their bitterness. But when you stop engaging, when you stop trying to explain yourself to the ones who were never willing to listen in the first place, when you stop performing for those who only showed up to critique, suddenly the stage they built for your destruction collapses under the weight of your silence. And in that silence, sacred, disciplined, Spirit-led God begins to move in ways your words never could. Because while you're quiet on the outside, something holy is happening on the inside. Your heart is being guarded, your peace is being preserved, your integrity is being protected, and your destiny is being realigned. Not according to their assumptions, but according to His purpose. Because let's be honest, the enemy wants you loud, reactive, emotionally unstable. He wants you dragged into the mud of conflict, drained by the weight of trying to prove your worth to people who were never qualified to measure it in the first place. And when you give in to that temptation, you hand over control, you abandon your peace, and you trade your spiritual authority for emotional outbursts that ultimately leave you feeling empty. But when you choose instead to hold your ground with grace, to remain silent when chaos screams for your attention, to let God be your defender while you focus on your assignment, you confuse every critic and disarm every enemy, because they don't know how to handle a person who doesn't fight the way they expect. They were prepared for war, but you brought peace. They anticipated drama, but you showed grace. They provoked you for weakness, but found wisdom instead, because grace, unlike noise, doesn't need to be loud to be effective. It doesn't beg to be heard. It just works quietly, steadily. And when grace is your posture, peace becomes your atmosphere. And I want to remind you of something deeply important. You don't owe anyone a performance to validate your healing. You don't need to craft the perfect comeback to prove your strength. And you surely don't have to justify the growth that happened in silence to people who only knew the version of you that was still bleeding, still broken, still reacting. Because God has been doing something sacred behind the scenes, restoring what was torn, refining what was rough, and redeeming what was lost. And when the time comes, what He's done in secret will speak louder than any apology you never received, louder than any lie that was told about you, louder than any rumor they whispered behind your back. You glow differently when bitterness no longer owns you. You walk differently when your heart is whole. You speak differently when healing has taken root so deeply that the old pain no longer stirs up the old reaction. And here's the truth: the best revenge to those who hurt you is not crafted through vengeance or retaliation, but through becoming whole in spite of what they did, through rising higher not because you were unscathed, but because you refused to stay stuck in the place where they left you. You don't need to scream to be powerful. You don't need to post your pain for the world to see in order to prove you survived. The most powerful revenge is living a life so healed, so purpose-filled, so anchored in peace that the ones who once hurt you can no longer reach you. Not because you hate them, but because you've been elevated beyond their reach by the grace of God. And that's the message Billy Graham would have echoed so clearly: the message of redemptive grace, of divine justice, of peace that surpasses understanding, a message that doesn't ignore the pain, but overcomes it with purpose, with healing, with maturity. So the next time someone tries to stir your emotions, tempt you into conflict, or question your growth, let your life, not your lips, be the loudest answer. And in the next part of this message, we'll go even deeper. Because learning to let go is just the beginning. Healing begins when you trust that God saw what they did and He knows exactly how to handle it. Sometimes we carry weights that were never meant for our shoulders, burdens that don't belong to us, wounds that we try to heal with justice, with answers, with closure. But the truth is, some of the pain we tried to fix was never ours to fix in the first place. And the longer we hold on to what they did, the more it begins to hold us back from who we are called to become. When people betray you, abandon you, lie about you, and leave you standing in the wreckage of something they shattered, it's natural to want to make it right, to want to restore the balance by forcing accountability, by chasing an apology, by proving that you mattered more than how they treated you. But God never intended for you to be the one to carry that weight. Because justice was never your job. It was His. You were never meant to avenge yourself. Never meant to replay the moment they walked away just to try and rewrite the ending. Never meant to stay stuck in the story of what they did, but rather to step out of it, to hand the pen back to God, and allow Him to write something new, something redemptive. Something that doesn't revolve around your pain but flows from your healing. Because when you try to take control, when you try to fix what broke you with your own hands, you end up entangled in battles that were never yours to fight. And that's when your peace disappears, your sleep vanishes, and your joy starts to rot beneath the weight of resentment. But there is a holy shift that happens when you finally lift your hands in surrender and say, God, I give this to you. I can't carry it anymore. I can't fix them. I can't heal what they never asked forgiveness for, but I trust that you saw every moment they hid, every word they whispered, every tear I cried in silence. Because the God you serve is not blind to betrayal, not deaf to dishonor, not unaware of injustice. He sees it all, and He doesn't just settle the score. He rewrites the entire outcome in your favor when you release it to Him. And sometimes the best revenge isn't making them pay, it's watching God turn the pain they caused into the platform you now stand on, the wound they left into the wisdom you now walk with, the rejection they served into the redirection that led you straight into your calling. You may not understand it in the moment, how silence can be stronger than shouting, how letting go can be more powerful than clinging to justice. But in the hands of God, that release becomes a weapon more potent than any words you could ever speak. Because God is not only just, He is precise. He knows when to correct, when to convict, and when to restore. And His timing is never off, even when yours feels desperate. Sometimes He won't remove the storm right away, not because He enjoys your struggle, but because He knows the storm is where your roots grow deeper, where your faith strengthens, and where your trust is no longer in people, but in Him. And sometimes, the very people who walked away were never meant to go with you into the next season. God allowed the separation not to hurt you, but to protect you from the weight of their presence in a space they could never honor. What looks like rejection may actually be protection. And what feels like abandonment might just be divine redirection. And the longer you try to control what hurt you, the longer you delay the healing that could have already begun. Because the greatest revenge, the one that heaven honors and hell fears, is not loud and vengeful, it is quiet and complete, and it begins the moment you decide, I will not let what broke me become what defines me. As we move into the next part of this message, we'll explore exactly how that decision to stop controlling, to stop chasing answers, and to truly let go can open the door to a peace so deep, it silences even the loudest echoes of the past. I know it's not easy, this choice to let go, to surrender, to remain silent when every fiber of your soul is crying out for justice, for validation, for someone to see the pain you've buried so well behind your smile. And I know that there are nights when you lie awake, not because your body is tired, but because your heart is carrying the weight of a wound no one else can see. The kind of pain that doesn't leave visible scars, but lingers like a shadow in your spirit. There is something uniquely heavy about being wronged and still having to walk with grace, about being misunderstood and still choosing dignity, about being pushed aside and still refusing to become bitter, and while the world tells you to fight back, to prove your worth, to demand your place at the table, heaven whispers something different. Let me fight for you. Let me handle what you were never created to carry. Because when you take revenge into your own hands, when you fixate on how to make them feel what they made you feel, when you let their actions govern your emotions, you begin to fight battles you were never built to win, and that's when the bitterness creeps in. Not as a sudden wave, but as a slow erosion, first stealing your peace, then your perspective, then your purpose, until one day you realize you're no longer moving forward, but circling the same pain that once hurt you, now hurting you again in memory. But something powerful begins to shift the moment you say, God, I don't understand it, but I choose to trust you with it. Because that's when your hands come off the wheel, and His hands begin to move with divine precision, doing what your strength never could, bringing healing, bringing justice, bringing restoration not just to your situation, but to the deep places inside you that no one else even knew were broken. Because God is not a passive observer of your pain, He is a just and present Father who marks every betrayal, every whisper behind your back, every moment you were overlooked, underestimated, or left behind. And He doesn't just take notes, He takes action, not on your timeline, not in your method, but in His own sovereign way. And when He acts, He doesn't just level the playing field, He changes the entire story. Sometimes, that change doesn't come by removing the storm, but by strengthening you within it. Sometimes, He doesn't take the people away immediately, because He wants you to grow strong enough that their presence no longer shakes your spirit. And sometimes, the reason He lets your heart break is because He knows that the version of you on the other side of that pain will be stronger, clearer, and more aligned with His purpose than you've ever been before. You see, heartbreak, as devastating as it is, often becomes the doorway to wholeness, and what we see as the end of something we cherished, God sees as the beginning of something we never would have walked into unless we were pushed, unless we were pruned, unless we were released from what we thought we needed but what He knew would only hold us back. So, stop trying to force justice where God has already spoken rest. Stop trying to fix what only grace can redeem. Stop replaying conversations, decoding silences, analyzing absence, because the longer you keep trying to carry it, the more you delay the peace that's been waiting for you all along. Let me remind you again. best revenge is not found in retaliation, not in proving them wrong, not in making them regret the day they hurt you. The best revenge is found in building a life so whole, so purpose-filled, so saturated with joy and wisdom and spiritual authority, that what they did simply no longer has the power to reach where you've risen. Because that's the power of grace. It doesn't just protect you from the offense. It elevates you beyond it. It makes their betrayal a bridge to your next level. Their rejection a redirection toward something better, something God ordained, something that doesn't require explanation to be beautiful. So today, don't chase closure, chase calling. Don't seek revenge, seek restoration. Don't spend another hour trying to convince someone to see your value when God already crowned you with it long before they left. And in the next part of this message, I'll show you exactly why letting go of revenge doesn't mean you've lost. It means you've made room for something so much greater. A peace they can't steal, a joy they don't understand, and a future so strong it silences every voice that tried to destroy you. Some of the most profound blessings you will ever receive will come not in spite of the pain you've endured, but because of it, because God, in His perfect sovereignty, has a way of taking what was meant to destroy you and using it as the very material to build you into someone stronger, wiser, and more deeply rooted in grace than you ever imagined possible. It's hard to see it in the moment. I know it's hard to believe that anything good could possibly come out of the tears you cried alone, out of the betrayal that shook your confidence, out of the seasons where your silence felt like suffocation instead of strength. But the truth is, God never wastes pain, and when you surrender that pain back to Him, He begins weaving it into a purpose that your enemies never saw coming. Sometimes, the people who broke you are the reason you step into the most powerful version of yourself, not because they helped you grow, but because they forced you to find God in a deeper way. To lean not on their approval, but on His presence, and in doing so, they unintentionally opened a door to the very strength they tried to steal from you. And it's in those quiet seasons, the ones where you feel forgotten, hidden, and misunderstood, that God does His greatest work, because while they walked away, He remained, and while they spoke against you, He spoke life into you, and while they saw only your flaws, He was shaping your faith. There is a reason that healing doesn't always happen in front of your enemies, a reason God sometimes hides your growth until the roots are strong enough to support the fruit. Because when He reveals what He's been doing in the secret places, there will be no question that it was Him who carried you through, Him who restored what was broken, Him who turned your scars into testimonies. And that's why you don't have to prove anything, not to them, not to yourself, not to the people watching from a distance wondering if you'll make it through. Because when your life becomes the evidence of grace, you don't need to defend your journey. You just need to keep walking it, step by step, with quiet confidence and unwavering trust. You see, when God vindicates you, it won't be subtle. He will make it so clear, so undeniable, that even those who doubted you will be forced to witness His hand over your life. And the beauty of that moment isn't in their regret. It's in your release, and the fact that you no longer need their recognition to feel whole. That's why real healing isn't loud. It doesn't arrive with fanfare or the applause of those who once hurt you. It comes in the stillness, in the mornings when you wake up without that heavy weight on your chest, in the conversations where you no longer flinch at their name, in the moments when you realize you haven't rehearsed that wound in days, maybe weeks, because the sting has finally lost its power. And make no mistake, this kind of healing doesn't come by accident. It comes by choice, by surrender, by repeatedly laying your heart before God and asking Him to do what you no longer have the strength to do alone. Because healing isn't pretending it didn't happen. It's not rewriting the past to soften the memory. It's not forcing forgiveness before you're ready. Healing is standing in the truth of what happened, acknowledging the pain it caused, and still choosing to believe that it doesn't get to have the final word, that what they took from you is nothing compared to what God is about to give you. And when you live from that place, not just surviving, but thriving, not just moving on, but rising up, you begin to radiate a kind of strength that doesn't need to shout, a kind of joy that doesn't need to explain itself, a kind of peace that confuses those who once tried to break you. You don't have to tell the world you healed, just live like someone who has. Let your calm be your clarity. Let your peace be your power. Let your consistency be the testimony that outlasts every rumor, every wound, every season of pain. And in the next part of this journey, we're going to dive deeper into the kind of growth that doesn't just help you recover, but makes sure you never return to the version of yourself that was tied to the people who broke you. You see, when someone breaks your heart, damages your trust, or walks away from your life without apology or explanation, it's easy to feel like the story has ended, with your hands empty and your soul aching. And your natural instinct is to want to reclaim control, to rehearse the pain, to dissect every moment, to wait for them to acknowledge what they did. But the longer you hold on to the memory of the wound, the longer that moment holds on to you, shaping your voice, your vision, and your future without permission. And that's where the enemy traps us, not just in what happened, but in what we keep reliving. He doesn't have to hurt us again if he can get us to carry the first hurt forever. Because a heart stuck in the past cannot walk boldly into the future, and a mind obsessed with justice can't receive the fullness of grace. When you constantly look back wondering why they left, why they betrayed, why they couldn't love you right, you start basing your value on their inability to recognize it. And when you do that, you hand your identity to the very people who mishandled it. But the truth is, your value was never theirs to determine, your future was never theirs to define, and your healing doesn't require their regret, it requires your release. And that release doesn't mean they were right. It doesn't mean it didn't hurt. It doesn't mean what they did was justified. It simply means you've chosen to protect your peace more than you protect your pride. You were never called to beg for closure, to chase down an apology, or to try to rewrite their opinion of you. The people who walked away don't need to understand your healing, because your journey was never about proving them wrong. It was about becoming who God always intended you to be, regardless of who stayed or who left. And maybe they do regret it. One day maybe time opens their eyes and memory softens their ego, but by then, you won't be waiting for that moment anymore. Because God has brought you so far forward that looking back would feel like returning to a house you've already outgrown, to a story you've already finished, to a pain that no longer fits who you've become. Because that's what healing does, not just restore what was broken, but transform the very way you live, love, and carry yourself. It gives you back your voice, but this time, it speaks with wisdom. It gives you back your confidence, but this time, it's rooted in identity, not approval. It gives you back your future, but this time, it's free from the shadows of people who were never meant to walk with you there. So stop watching their life, waiting to see if they fall. Stop scrolling through their updates hoping to catch signs of regret. Stop replaying conversations where you wished you said more. Because their harvest is not your concern, their silence is not your sentence, and their absence is not your end. You're not here to get even. You're here to get free. Free from bitterness, free from proving, free from performing for people who never really saw your heart. Because the best revenge is not revenge at all, it's resurrection. It's rising from the pain. It's building something beautiful where the ruins once stood. It's becoming someone so full of grace that their failure no longer defines your future. And in this final part of the message, we'll talk about what that freedom looks like when it's lived, not just spoken of, but embodied day by day, so that when the world looks at you, they no longer see what was done to you, but what God has done in you. And maybe, just maybe, the real miracle isn't that you survived what they did to you, but that you no longer need them to say they were wrong for you to know you were right. That you no longer crave the moment they return just to validate the loyalty they once took for granted, because now you've grown so far past that place that even if they came back, they wouldn't recognize the version of you who stands here today whole, wiser, and untouched by the storm they once stirred. That's the power of grace. It rewrites your story without erasing the pages. It turns your pain into a platform, and your silence into a statement, not of weakness, but of victory. Because healing isn't about pretending you were never hurt. It's about standing in full awareness of what happened and still choosing not to carry it with you anymore. And when you walk like that light, free, no longer defined by who hurt you, you shine in a way that can't be manufactured by revenge or fueled by ego. It's a glow that comes only from having passed through fire and coming out not burned, but refined, not bitter, but better. You no longer walk into rooms hoping to prove your worth. You carry your worth with you. You no longer shrink at the sound of their name. You rise higher. Because grace has elevated you beyond their reach. And let me tell you, when you live in that space, in that strength, in that peace, there is no louder victory, no deeper revenge, and no greater testimony than simply becoming everything they never imagined you could be, without ever needing them to see it. Some wounds don't bleed outward, they bleed inward. Quietly, slowly, invisibly. And often, we carry them far longer than we should, not because we can't heal, but because part of us still believes that justice must come before joy. That we can't move on until they see, until they know, until they regret. But here's the truth: healing and freedom do not wait for their remorse. They begin the moment you decide you are worth more than the weight of what they did. You see, God never promised that people wouldn't hurt you. He never said that the road would be smooth, that hearts wouldn't break, or that relationships wouldn't fail. But what he did promise is that he would never leave you in the aftermath, that he would walk with you through the wreckage, that he would rebuild what was shattered, restore what was stolen, and redeem what was thrown away. And that redemption, that rising, is not loud. It is not public. It is not always visible at first. Sometimes, it looks like waking up and realizing you're no longer angry. Sometimes, it's choosing not to send the message you drafted in your head 100 times. Sometimes, it's smiling again, not because everything's perfect, but because your soul finally feels light again. Because true strength is not in vengeance, but in vision. It's in seeing your life beyond the pain, your purpose beyond the wound, and your future beyond the one who walked away. You don't need to be seen by those who overlooked you. You don't need to be validated by those who betrayed you. You don't need to be understood by those who refused to hear you. Because the God who formed you already called you worthy, already declared you chosen, already began shaping a future for you that no betrayal, no rumor, no heartbreak can destroy. And when you live in that kind of truth, when you walk boldly in that kind of grace, your life becomes the loudest testimony. The kind of victory that doesn't demand revenge because it outgrows the need for it entirely. You become untouchable not because pain doesn't come, but because pain no longer defines your response. You become unshakable not because storms stop, but because your roots run deeper than the winds that try to move you. You become radiant not because they return to say sorry, but because you never waited for them to in order to bloom. Let them go. Let the bitterness fade. Let your heart breathe again. Because every moment you spend trying to make someone regret leaving is a moment stolen from the life you were meant to build after they did. The best revenge is not in what you say. It's in how you live. It's in the peace they couldn't steal, the joy they never gave you, the healing they never expected you'd find. So build a life so whole, so grounded in purpose, so filled with grace and wisdom, That even if they looked back, they wouldn't recognize you. Not because you're hiding, but because you've been transformed. That's what grace does. That's what God does. He doesn't just put you back together. He makes you brand new. So today, if you hear anything, hear this. You are not broken beyond repair. You are not defined by who left. You are not less because of what happened. You are more because you survived, because you're still standing, because you chose growth over grudges, and grace over revenge. Let your healing be your loudest revenge. If this message spoke to your heart, don't let it stop here. Share it with someone who's been holding on to pain they were never meant to carry. Drop a comment below and tell me, what part of this message did you need to hear today? And if you're walking through a season of silence, betrayal, or healing, know this: you're not alone. You are not forgotten. And your story is not over. Subscribe for more messages like this, because every week, we're going deeper into truth, grace, and the kind of strength this world can't give. Your healing matters. Your growth matters. And yes, your voice matters. So don't just watch, be part of the movement, because together, we're turning pain into purpose and letting grace write the final word. Thank you for your listening. Goodbye and see you in the next video.